10. My Amish wife wanted divorce while pregnant. I chose the church over her. The lamp is still burning when she says it. Low flame. The kerosene smell mixing with the chamomile I'd just steeped for her morning sickness. She's 6 months along. Her hands are on the small of her back, the way Ma'am used to stand. And her voice is quieter than I've ever heard it. Joseph, I want to leave. I don't look up. I keep stirring the honey into the cup. 3 slow turns. That's what Grossdaddy taught me. 3 turns clockwise, so the medicine takes. My thumb is shaking against the spoon, and I don't want her to see it. Rebecca, I say. Don't, but she already has. The words are already in the room. And the baby is between us, round and quiet under her apron. And outside the window the wind is moving through the corn, the way it does in late August. Dry, hissing, like something already dying. I remember. No, wait. It wasn't the corn yet. It was the oats. The oats were still standing. That's how I know what month it was. She says it again, softer. I want a divorce. I'm 31 years old. My wife is carrying my 3rd child, and the cup of chamomile in my hand is the last gentle thing I will give her for a long, long time. Quick pause. My name is Joseph, and this is not. If these stories stay with you, if they remind you of something the old ones knew, subscribe. It's free, and it's the reason I can keep telling them. Tell me in the comments, what's the one remedy your grandmother made that you'd give anything to taste again? And if you want to go further, a super chat or a membership, that's you telling me these old ways are worth remembering. That keeps this going. Now, back to what happened. In our community, you don't leave. That's not a rule somebody wrote down. The ordning doesn't have a page that says it plain, but every boy who grew up in an old order house knew it the way he knew which side of the barn the wind hit first. Marriage is a covenant before God, and a covenant doesn't bend because a woman is tired, or a man is hard, or a baby is coming wrong. You hold. You hold the way Dad held when Ma'am lost the twins in '89. You hold the way Grossdaddy held when his first wife went silent for 2 years after the diphtheria took their oldest. The browser comes for the body, the bishop comes for the soul, and the husband holds the house up while both of them do their work. Nobody taught me that. I just saw it done, from the time I could carry a milk pail, and the healing was tied up in all of it. Rebecca's mother had taught her the T's: red raspberry leaf for the womb, ginger for the nausea, nettle for the blood. I knew them too, the way a man knows them, from the edges. I knew which jar in the cellar was which by the color of the glass. I knew Grossdaddy's tincture of motherwort sat on the 3rd shelf, behind the canned beets, because a pregnant woman's heart sometimes runs ahead of itself and the motherwort settles it. I'd reach for it without thinking. That's how it lived. Not in books, in hands. And when Rebecca started crying at night and I didn't know why, I reached for the jar before I reached for her. I think that was the first wrong turn, but I didn't see it then. Rebecca and I had been married 7 years that August. We had 2 boys already. Eli was 5, Amos was 3, and the 3rd was coming in November. We'd known each other since we were children. Her father's farm sat across the creek from ours, and I'd watched her walk to school in the same gray dress for 3 winters before I ever spoke to her. When I finally did, I was 16 and my voice cracked and she laughed at me, and then apologized for laughing, and I knew right then. I knew, the way Dat said you'd know. Joseph, he told me once, leaning on the fence by the south pasture, a man only gets one woman who makes his hands quiet. The rest just keep them busy. Rebecca made my hands quiet. But by that summer, the summer of the oats, she wasn't laughing anymore. She'd grown thin in the face, even as her belly grew. She'd stopped singing while she canned. She used to sing, old hymns mostly, but sometimes just humming, no tune at all, just sound to keep the kitchen from being too quiet. That summer the kitchen was quiet. I noticed it. I want you to know I noticed. I just didn't know what to do with the noticing. In our world, a man fixes what's broken. He doesn't sit with what's hurting. And Rebecca was hurting in a way no poultice was going to draw out. She'd come to me twice before that night. The first time was after Amos was born. She'd said she felt like she was disappearing. Those were her exact words. Joseph, I feel like I am disappearing. I told her she was tired. I told her to drink the nettle tea and rest. The second time was in the spring. when the third was just beginning to show. She said she didn't want another one yet. She said her body wasn't ready. I told her God decides when bodies are ready, and we don't. I said it the way Dad would have said it. Plain, final. The way you close a barn door against rain. I didn't see her face when I said it. I was sharpening a scythe blade and I kept my eyes on the stone. That's what I remember. The stone, not her face. So when she said it that August night, when she said the word divorce, it wasn't out of nowhere. It was the third time she'd come to me, and I had not heard her the first 2 times. The lamp was burning. The chamomile was cooling. The boys were asleep upstairs in the room with the slanted ceiling. The room where I'd nailed the loose floorboard down myself the week before because Amos kept tripping on it. And my wife was standing in our kitchen, 6 months pregnant, asking me to let her go. I set the cup down on the table. The honey hadn't fully dissolved. I could see it sitting at the bottom, gold and slow. "You can't," I said. It came out harder than I meant. "Rebecca, you can't. The church." "I know what the church says, Joseph." "Then you know." "I know." She put her hand on her belly. Not to protect it, just to feel it, to remind herself it was there. "I know what the church says. I'm asking what you say." And here is where I failed her. I want to be plain about this. I'm not going to dress it up. She asked me what I said, and I gave her what the church said. I told her about the covenant. I told her about the bishop. I told her what would happen, the shunning, the maidung, the way her own father would have to turn his face from her at the table. I told her about the boys. I told her about the baby. I quoted scripture. I quoted Dat. I quoted my grandfather, who'd been dead 11 years and couldn't defend himself. I said every word I had been raised to say, in the order I had been raised to say it. And while I was saying it, Rebecca sat down at the kitchen table and put her forehead against the wood and didn't move. Her shoulders weren't shaking. She wasn't crying. She was just gone. Already gone, and I kept talking. I kept talking because I was afraid of what the quiet would mean if I stopped. When I finally ran out of words, she lifted her head. Her eyes were dry. That's what scared me most. I would have known what to do with tears. I'd have made her the motherwort tincture, 7 drops in warm water, the way Grossdaddy did for Ma'am. I'd have put my hand on the back of her neck. I'd have called for the brochure in the morning. But there were no tears. She said, "All right, Joseph." That was all. All right. And she got up and went to bed. And I sat at the table until the lamp ran out of kerosene and the kitchen went dark. And I didn't pray. I couldn't. I just sat there, my hands flat on the wood. My wedding cup of chamomile cold beside me, the honey still sitting at the bottom, refusing to mix. What I didn't know, what neither of us understood that night, was that Rebecca was sick, not in her body, in the deeper place. The English have a word for it now. Prenatal depression, they call it. Some call it perinatal. I didn't know either word existed. In our community, we had words for grief, for trial, for the testing of faith. We had words for the woman who couldn't get out of bed after a baby. We called it the dark milk, quietly, behind our hands. But we didn't have a word for what was happening to Rebecca while the baby was still inside her. There was no remedy in the cellar for it. There was no tea Grossdaddy had taught me. There was no poultice. The old ones knew a lot. They knew almost everything. But they didn't know this. And I leaned on the church because I didn't know what else to lean on. That's the truth of it. I wasn't choosing the church over her. I was choosing the only thing I knew how to hold. But I have to be honest about Dat, too. Because Dat was the one I called the next morning. I hitched the buggy before sunrise and I drove to his farm and I told him what Rebecca had said. And Dat was not a hard man. I need you to understand that. He just did what his father did, and his father before him. He sat me down at his kitchen table and he poured me coffee and he said, "Joseph, a woman carrying a child says things. You hold the line. You hold it for her. She'll come back to herself." That's what he said. And I believed him. Because he was my father. And because for 31 years he had been right about almost everything. I drove home with his words in my chest like a stone I'd swallowed. I thought it was strength. I thought I was being a man. What I learned later, much later, was that Dat's own mother had asked his father the same question, the year before Dat was born. And his father had given her the same answer. The silence was older than any of us. It went back further than I could see. Continue. The pattern set in like frost. Slow. Quiet. By October, Rebecca was barely speaking. She made the meals, she washed the boys. She canned the last of the tomatoes and lined the jars on the cellar shelf in the straight rows she always made, labels facing out. From the outside, nothing was wrong. From the inside, my wife was a house with the lamps blown out. I kept making her teas. Red raspberry leaf in the morning, chamomile at night. I put the motherwort tincture in her water and didn't tell her. 7 drops, then 10, then 15. I thought if I could just get the dose right, the woman I married would come back. That's the dark joke of it. I was trying to fix a soul sickness with a tincture for the heart. Gross Daddy would have laughed at me. Not cruelly, just the way he laughed at anything that thought it was simpler than it was. The baby came in November, a girl. We named her Hannah. Rebecca held her and fed her and changed her and did not look at her the way she'd looked at the boys. I noticed that too. I'm telling you, I noticed everything that fall, and I did nothing with any of it. At the barn raising that month, my cousin Levi's new dairy barn, out past Smicksburg, I stood with the men around the coffee urn and I heard things. I want to tell you what I heard. My uncle Amos, leaning on a sawhorse, said quietly to my cousin Daniel, "Sarah went under after Rachel was born, 2 years before she came back." Daniel said, "Mine went under before," while she was carrying. Just like that, 7 words. And then they were quiet, and they drank their coffee, and nobody said another thing. I stood there with my cup in my hand, and I almost said it. About Rebecca. The words were in my mouth. But a man in our world doesn't lay his wife's trouble down in front of other men. So I swallowed it. I swallowed it with the coffee. And I drove home that night, and Rebecca was asleep, with Hannah on her chest, and her face was wet, and I didn't ask why. There was another man in our district. I won't say his name. He'd lost his wife the spring before mine got sick. Lost her. I mean, the way a man loses a wife who's still in the house. She'd taken to walking out into the back field at night. He'd find her sitting in the wet grass with her nightgown soaked through. He told me this once, just once, when we were repairing a fence line together. He said, "Joseph, I should have called somebody. I should have called the English doctor. I didn't know I was allowed." That sentence has lived in my chest ever since. I didn't know I was allowed. That was the silence. Not a wall. A locked door we'd all been handed the key to and told never to use. 4 winters later, his wife was still in their house, and she was still not there. And I think about him most nights. It was the 3rd spring after Hannah was born when I found the word. I was in town, Belleville, picking up a part for the hay rake. And I went into the little library on Main Street because it had started to rain and I had an hour before the part would be ready. I'd never been in there before. The English woman at the desk nodded at me and didn't stare, which I appreciated. I walked along the shelves with my hat in my hands, and there was a book, brown cover, a woman's name on the front. I don't remember the title now. I remember the chapter, When the Darkness Comes Before the Baby. I stood in that aisle, and I read for 40 minutes. I forgot the hay rake part. I forgot the rain. I read about women whose bodies grew children while their minds grew shadows. I read about the chemistry of it, the way the blood changes, the way the brain starves for something it cannot name. I read that it was not weakness. It was not lack of faith. It was not a test. It was a sickness. As real as pneumonia, as real as a broken bone. And nobody had told my wife. I sat down on the floor of that aisle. A grown Amish man, 34 years old, in suspenders and a straw hat, on the carpet of an English library, with a book in my hands. I didn't cry. I just couldn't stand up for a while. The land doesn't lie, Gross Daddy used to say, and the book in my hands wasn't lying either. It was telling me the truth about my own wife. 4 years late, what I grieved most was not what I had done. It was what I had not heard. Rebecca had told me 3 times. She had used her own words. I feel like I am disappearing. My body isn't ready. I want to leave. 3 sentences, 3 remedies she was asking me for, and I gave her tea instead. For the boy who sat at that kitchen table with the cold chamomile. For the man he became at 31, who quoted scripture at his drowning wife. I have a tenderness now I didn't have then. He didn't know. He was doing what his father did. None of us knew different. But knowing doesn't lift the weight. It just lets you carry it with both hands instead of one. I tried, once, to explain this to an English friend who runs the feed store in town. He listened, and he nodded, and at the end he said, "Joseph, I'm so sorry," and I knew he meant it. But he couldn't know. He couldn't know what it cost to learn, in an English library, the name of the thing that almost took your wife, when your own grandfather had a tincture for everything except that. I want to tell you what the Amish life gave me, because I am not here to tear it down. I am here to tell the truth, and the truth has two hands. The Amish life gave me the smell of cut hay in July, drying in the south field, sweet enough to make a grown man stand still. It gave me the sound of my father's hand-plane working oak in the wood shop, the long, slow shk of curls coming off the board, a sound I could find in the dark. It gave me the taste of cold spring water from the pump behind the milk house, water so cold it made your teeth hurt and your chest open up. These are not small things. These are the gifts I'm raising my children inside of. I am still here. I never left. Rebecca never left either. She came back to herself, slowly, the year Hannah turned 4, with the help of an English midwife who knew what nobody in our district had known. I am homesick for a place I never left. That's the contradiction I live in. What I know now is this: wisdom dressed in plain clothes is still only wisdom. It is not the whole of knowing. The old ones knew almost everything. They did not know everything. And tradition and truth can sit at the same table, but only if we let the truth pull up a chair. I am building something quieter now, with Rebecca. We talk in the evenings. We didn't used to. I ask her how her heart is, the way I used to ask the cows how their milk was coming. It feels strange in my mouth still, but she answers. And that is a remedy too. Maybe the oldest one. The one Grossdaddy never named because he didn't have to. If you grew up somewhere your grandfather's hands knew more than the doctor's, I see you. If you carry a remedy book in your bones that nobody wrote down, you carry something old. And that is enough. You don't have to choose between the cellar and the library. Both can be true. Both can save somebody. If you're still inside the community, holding a wife or a husband who is disappearing, I see you. If you left, and you took the recipes with you in your hands, I see you. If you're English, but something keeps pulling you back to the old ways your great-grandmother knew, I see you. If your grandfather knew a cure he never wrote down, and now he's gone, I see you. If you lost someone modern medicine couldn't reach, and the old ways couldn't reach them either, I see you most of all. Wherever you are in this, I see you, and you are not alone. Tell me down in the comments, what did your family carry that nobody else knew? A poultice? A tea? A word said over a sick child at midnight? I want to read them. I read every one. There is so much more I haven't said yet. About the broker who came the spring. Rebecca finally turned the corner. About the tincture my grandfather made that I still can't bring myself to brew. I'm not ready, but I'm getting closer. If these stories matter to you, stay with me here at .subscribe so the next one finds you. And if a super chat or a membership feels right, that's you telling me the old ways are worth remembering. That keeps this fire going. Hold the ones who are disappearing before they're gone.